because the first thing I want to introduce to you guys is the big picture of what you guys can be facing, the topics in the actual exam. And these are those 9 we mentioned about earlier. They're just here, but not only these 9, plus they can test anything from the past levels. So all the skills, all the knowledge required, all from your past studies therefore. So let's get into these 9 topic areas and what is popular and what's not so popular. First thing I want you guys to see is that before we had the Capstone exam, we used to have the FE exam. And look, it used to be 25%, 25%, 25%, all equal. Module 11, 12, 13 and 14. Then, when we had the pilot exam showing us what the real exam could be like, we couldn't believe 75% of the marks were on M12 topics. And look, 92%, 90%, in the last exam, 94%. So you can see the past Capstone exam papers here, a lot of Module 12 topics is what we've got. And look, let's have a little look. Let's start here because, as I mentioned earlier, you've got 2 sets of notes. So let's start with our set 1 set of notes. Because this evening, we've got this topic 1, develop business strategy. Now, this is where you can find it in your QP learning pack. This is where you can find it in that Capstone learning and practice workbook. But one thing here, look, topic 1 is not popular at all. So I want you guys to think about this. This evening, you might find we're going a little bit too fast. Yes, you might, session 1, it was too fast. I didn't like it, it's too fast. If you're finding it too fast, and I'll remind you later on of this when we start going fast, it's because I want to spend more time on the popular topic areas. Look at this. It's what I mentioned earlier. Topic 2 is the most popular area. Look, you can see many exam questions here. And because it's so popular, I've broken it into 3 parts. We've got the basic business decision models. So that's popular. We've got merger acquisitions. Look at this, 30 marks on merger acquisitions. And then we've also got things like financial reconstruction and downsizing. So we're going to be spending a bunch of time on topic 2. It's going to take a lot of time up. You're going to find that. So that's why we're moving quick on our topic 1. And then maybe second most popular topic, once we've made a decision, we then need to implement the business solution. So look, again, you can see here quite popular in the Capstone exams. And then last of all, we've got topic 4. Topic 4 is quite odd because it's quite rare, but when it got tested, it was 26 marks. So it's still an area we still need to be aware of. So that'll finish off our set 1 set of notes. Then you guys will then get set 2 set of notes. I said I'm writing those at the moment. And what you'll find is, by the time we get into our 10th session, we start running out of time. So I think we'll have some time for topic 5. Topic 5 is raising finance. And so you can see that there's a few questions on raising finance. But what I'll have done, by the time I've written set 2, and then we're getting towards near the end of the course, I will pre-record all these other topic areas, and then I'll give them out as bonus videos. So you guys are going to have on my course, on my QP Module 12, you're going to have a load of extra bonus videos, a load of extra tuition to be working on, because we're not going to skip anything. And I want to go through, especially on these topics here, 2 and 3. These are very, very popular. Then you'll find here in set 2, we've got corporate governance, nothing in the actual exam. We've got regulatory compliance, 1 question there. Ethics has been quite popular, so we need to spend some time on topic 8. And also risk management here. Hedging, identifying risks. That's also been quite popular. You can see down just there. So that's what we're facing in our actual exam, and that's why the reason we're going to be spending time on certain topic areas. So as I said, if you're finding this evening a little bit quick, that's why I want to get on to 2 and spend more time on 2. Let's turn across over the next page, and I want you guys to see the big picture here, because in your capstone exam they can give you any scenario. They could give you, for instance, a profit-making organization, manufacturer, service, retailer, importer, exporter. They could give you a non-profit making organization. They've never done this, but potentially they could give you a government organization, a hospital or a health center, something like this, or even a charity, an NGO, a non-government organization. Then you'd still be thinking about the syllabus areas. So still you'd be thinking here about strategic management, topics 1 to 4. And let's start thinking first about, because this is what we're going to start off with in our set 1 set of notes. And look, we're going to be thinking here mostly about strategic long-term plans. Let's break the organization up, look. And if we put long-term strategic, they can ask you to put together a long-term strategic plan. This is actually what most of the syllabus is all based around, putting together a long-term strategic plan. And that's going to involve topic 1. So that's going to be this evening. We're going to start thinking about direction, where we want to go. Then we've got topic 2, which is looking at decision choices. Then we've got topic 3, which is implementing that solution. And then topic 4 is our leadership and management, therefore. So this is all about our strategy. And whenever we start thinking about the direction, whenever we start thinking here about decisions, we're always thinking about doing the right thing. So we're thinking about things like ethics, therefore. So we're going to be talking about the code of ethics later on. So we've got long-term decisions. When we implement, we're going to see we've got some long-term controls as well. So we need to make sure we're achieving what we're supposed to be achieving. Now, you're going to find that in the capstone exam, they ask questions about strategic, long-term. So that's thinking about, maybe 5 or more years ahead. It's a long-term, 5 or plus more years. Tactical is much more medium-term. So this is thinking about what we're doing. This is more about tactical, means like how are we going to do it? So how are we going to market it? How are we going to use resources for it? Are we going to use part-time, full-time? And this is thinking maybe in the next, maybe 1 to 3 years. We're not thinking so long-term. We're thinking medium-term. And again, they could ask us some medium-term decisions or some medium-term controls. And then finally, we've got here short-term. So short-term or operational. So again, they could ask for a short-term plan. A short-term plan, you'd be thinking about in the next year, what we're going to be doing there for. Daily activities in each department. And then daily decisions is what we could have here. So this is daily up to around about 1 year. Operational is very, very short term. So what do we need to do to achieve those tactical plans? And ultimately, if we're going to achieve that, it should mean that we're achieving our long-term strategic plan. So this is all going to be, most of the course is going to be this topic 1 to 4. And then near at the end of the course, we've then got the financial management areas, topics 5 to 9. And topic 5, I think we'll have time to start that topic area. It's on corporate finance. And what you guys will find is that what we're thinking about here is what we're investing in. So if we're investing, let's say we've got here a long-term plan, and that involves some long-term investment assets, we should always be matching it by using long-term sources of funds. So let's put in here, matching is what we should always be thinking about doing just here. It's an important concept, and we'll spend more time on it in the actual course. So matching, we're trying to match the length. Long-term asset, long-term source of funds. If we've got short-term investment in assets, you guys can see now what we're going to say here. We should be using here a short-term source of funds. So for instance, if we think about working capital, If you think about something like maybe inventory might only be a short-term requirement. So we're only going to be using here flexible. Let's just think back to what we did last time. So I know last time, as I mentioned, we was going quite quick. If we go back to our introduction, we was going quite quickly through our topic 1 because we said, look, it's quite rare in the actual exam. It's only ever been tested twice in our capstone exam, and both were on about performance measures. So we saw last time there was that question here. This was back to page 26, where we were talking about, coming up with some KPIs. This was for that company was developing hot pot soups. This was for the overseas customers. And then right at the end of last time, I left you guys here with a practice question. So page 28. So we introduced the pre-seam. Let's now have a little look here at what the question was asking us about. So same as before. First thing when you in the actual exam, this is the exam day additional information you get. And look, we've got Lena and Jenny, and what they want to do is establish a new performance measuring system and mechanism for the forthcoming tea and bread operations, as well as operations, it says, for the premium, selling the premium products. So we saw that in the pre-scene here. We saw that the company, they make and they serve bread and tea. And then we saw, look, there was this merchandising unit just here. So this was quite new. This is during 2022. It says they fully understand that existing performance measurement and evaluation yardsticks may not be completely appropriate. And that's what this question is about. They're not 100% appropriate for the forthcoming operations, but they have no concrete ideas how to establish a new measurement and evaluation yardstick. So let's go straight down now to our requirement. And they're asking us here, it says a senior accountant of the company, you're required to discuss and comment on whether each of the 3 proposed KPIs, or here they're calling them indices, whether they are suitably adopted for establishment and are functional. So in other words, are they appropriate? Are they suitable? Functional means could they work as a KPI for the forthcoming, and we're told here, operating units. So if we go back here, look, you can see they mentioned here about the operations. So we've got here, this is premium selling, bread and tea operations. And look, what we need to go back, and what many students missed out was this. If we go back here to the bread and the tea, this has been long established. So let's put down here, look, this is going to be our bread and tea. Let's call it, as they're calling it, an operating unit. And look, this one has been established a long time. It's been there since 2003. Whereas, let's call this one something like a merchandising unit, an MU unit. Look, this is relatively new. This is emerging. This is, when was this question set? Look, June 2023. So this was during just the year before. So this is very, very new, sourcing premium products from Japan, Spain, and Australia. And what they're asking us here about is about the 3 proposed KPIs. Where are they? Well, what we need to do, of course, is carry on reading the question just here. And it says, look, this is Lena and Jenny again. They've tried to read some textbooks, have searched various websites for information on establishing KPIs, and they've considered the following 3 KPIs. So look, the first one here we've got is net profit margin 1. Second one is customer satisfaction index, that's 2. And then we've got here our operating revenues. So those are the 3 KPIs they must be referring to just here. It says, based on the preliminary research by Lena and Jenny, they believe these to be useful, meaningful, if they were established for the group. But what we need to do is start thinking about that one. It's about the individual operating units. And look, they're thinking they may not be completely appropriate. Now, what students did, they answered this one very, very badly. For 9 marks, they just simply went, right, profit margin, yep, customer satisfaction, yep, operating revenues, yep, and that's all they did. They went, yes, 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 next question. Now, of course, we need to think a little bit deeper here. Just hold on. We've got different units. We've got old and established. We've got very new and emerging. And what they're wanting is a bit more detail about the fact if we've got different operating units, we need to think about maybe different KPIs. So look, let's just put a little introduction here first. So first of all, when we start developing these KPIs, the business operations, we need to ensure that the KPI for existing, as well as we've got some newer operating units, these are suitable and functional, because we should be thinking here about setting different KPIs. This is set separately for each individual operating unit. And look, as we just said above, we've got a bread and tea operations. They're going to be different here to the merchandising unit that sell premium products sourced from around the world. So what we now need to start getting into is thinking about these 3 proposed KPIs. Do we think that they are suitable and functional? This is going to be for our 2 units that we've got just here. Well, before we start getting into the depth into the solution, look, first of all, if we think about financial perspective, so if we go back to our Kaplan Norton balance scorecard, profitability is going to be important in just about every place in the business. So yes, that's going to be relevant, functional, that's going to be suitable for the bread and the tea. It's also going to be suitable for the premium price products as well. But let's think about these other 2 just here. So remember we talked last time about, if we start a new business, satisfaction, yeah, okay, to some degree it's suitable, but what's more important is acquiring customers, not satisfying them when we just opened up and just started. So this one, customer satisfaction, this is going to be much more relevant to the bread and the tea, which is established and is quite, long time we've had it for the business. Whereas a new business, so we talked about, acquiring customers would be good, or here, maybe operating revenue. So if we're starting to build the business, we should see growth in things like our operating revenues. And so what we need to talk about here is why we think about certain maybe KPIs may be functional and suitable, but also because it's 9 marks, you're also going to get lots and lots of marks for also explaining why you think they are not going to be so suitable or functional. So this is what they're wanting here in your capstone exam. For 9 marks, they're wanting a little bit more depth. So look, what I'm now going to do, 9 marks, we've got 3, this is KPIs, so best thing for us to do, let's put down here some headings, and then let's discuss each as we start going through our answer. Let's start with the first one, because as we just mentioned earlier, profitability, of course, it's one of the most important KPIs for any operating unit to measure. It relates back, of course, to the company's profit-making objective. But let's start thinking about net profit. This is not operating profit. This is not gross profit. This is net. This is bottom line. And that would mean that not only is it deducting things like the operating unit expenses from the revenue, but also, because it's bottom line profit, it would also be deducting these. These are the general overheads of the business. So we'd have to think about how those have been allocated, because they should be shared appropriately to avoid unfairly distorting the bread and the tea and the MU profits. And also here it's a margin. So let's come back to that, because that's also quite good as well. A margin is a percentage. And let's say something like this. It would be unfair to compare net profit in absolute terms. As bigger and the more established bread and tea, they will make bigger profits. So what's good is here, by measuring a margin percentage ratio, that's very useful, because what it should do is enable a fairer evaluation between the 2 operating units. Let me give you an example what I mean by that, because sometimes students ask me what do we mean exactly by that. Look, let's put some simple numbers together. So for example, let's say that the bread and the tea unit, let's say something like they are generating revenue. Let's put a little simple example together here of 10 million. Let's also put down here their net profit, let's say is something like 2 million. So what we could do is calculate their net profit margin. So let's say something like they would be achieving their 20%. Let's then start looking at the MU. Because if we were just to have a little look here, just in absolute terms, let's say for example here, and these numbers are not from the scenario, I'm just making these up. But look, let's say the revenue of the MU was 4 million. And we was only looking at absolute numbers. So let's say something like their net profit was 1 million. So you can see here, if we were looking in absolute terms, it would look like here the bread and tea is doing a better job. 2 million versus here only 1 million. So in absolute terms, it's unfair to compare. Bigger units make bigger profits, therefore. So what's good is, by using a margin, this is useful, it enables a fairer comparison. So look, let's do a little calculation now about the net profit margin. And look, you can see that here, it's actually these guys have got a bigger margin. So if we were comparing the net profit margin directly there, you can see, look, the MU unit, they would be having a better performance therefore. Let's put a little conclusion to this, because as we said here earlier, both would be appropriate therefore. So in conclusion, the net profit margin, it's going to be suitable KPI for evaluation. This is of both the bread and the tea, and then the MU units therefore. So that would be our net profit margin. Let's then move on to the customer satisfaction index, and let's just explain straight away that this of course would be more suitable for the bread and the tea. Why? Because they've been established longer, so its future success, this would much more heavily rely on the continued support, loyalty and satisfaction of its customers therefore, and that would be of course on the bread and the tea business. So we're saying, look, this one's more suitable for that actual operating unit here. Let's say for the MU units, this is premium product line. The point is this, it's relatively new, so not only is it unsuitable, but because it's so new, it'd be difficult in the short term to set fair and appropriate satisfaction indexes, because the group, the customers, is new and being established. We don't really know much about them so far, so we said, look, maybe customer acquisition will be better. So look, that is not going to be good there. We're going to say, but of course, in the longer term, so let's explain here, longer term, of course, it is suitable to, this is evaluate the satisfaction across all the areas of the business. But of course, again, we'll be thinking about different criteria for different units, therefore. So this would be more traditional bread and tea. This would be more, you know, maybe modern merchandising, premium products, so luxurious brands. There would be differences between those actual two. And then finally, let's then start getting into our operating revenue. So again, we're going to start saying, normally when you start a new business unit, it's going to be very important to try to gain that customer awareness, grow the business. And so we could see that operating revenue and increasing operating revenue definitely be a part towards achieving that. So let's mention here for the MU's new and emerging unit, you can see, look, the operating revenue figure, this is going to be a suitable KPI as it's very useful to measure, compare and evaluate, especially something like that, the rate of the growth in the total sales revenue across this premium price product. But we're also going to get marks for explaining, look, why this is not going to be suitable for the bread and the tea, or less suitable. So look, the absolute level of operating revenue, it's going to be less suitable KPI here for a long and well established bread and tea unit, where it's more appropriate to measure figures maybe like contribution or gross profit or net profit. That's going to be much better than just the total sales revenue. Now, I'd just go back and just finally finish off for 9 marks just at the end. This is financial, this is financial, this is customer perspective. Well, we shouldn't just be only looking at those KPIs. We talked about balanced scorecard last time. So let's just finish off by saying, look, in the longer term, it's going to be important for Lena and Jenny to consider using a balanced scorecard approach to measure and evaluate all areas of performance. So we shouldn't just only be thinking here about financial and the customer perspective, but we should be thinking about other important KPI areas, internal business, learning and growth. We mentioned them all last time. And finally, let's put again a little conclusion or overall just here. So it means that in the future, Lena and Jenny need to be careful and give more thought before using each of these 3 KPIs to evaluate the performance of the bread and tea and the MU units, not only now, but also going ahead in the future. Now, this is not the official solution. This is actually my solution. So when I sometimes see official solutions and I think they're not very well written, or I think that we can do a better job, I'll put my own solution forward. And look, I'm just trying to show you guys, for 9 marks, we don't need to write this much. We've written way too much. Look, 1, 2, 3, that's the little introduction. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, we've got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We've got 15 short paragraphs there. Way too much. But that's what we need to start thinking about doing in the capstone exam. Remember, you guys, you've got 4 hours. You've got lots of time. And most of that time, you want to spend gaining marks, writing your answer up, coming up with lots and lots of arguments and different points. Because look, you can see the performance on this part. This was less than satisfactory. Many candidates simply stated that the proposed KPIs are functional for both, and they did not carefully consider whether the KPI was functional or maybe even remotely useful. So they're asking you, it's not going to be a simple case of yes, yes, yes. We need to think a little bit deeper here. Look, so in this special question, candidates should find that certain KPIs are more useful for one unit. So it was obvious that for something like new and emerging, satisfaction's not going to be a great one, it's going to be better ones. Things like acquiring new customers, whereas other units will be less useful due to their characteristic variations. So that one I left you guys with. Quite a tricky one just there, but hopefully you guys got time to practice it. Let's continue. Let's now move on.